Tonight we are going to continue with our mini-series about the worlds of Tohu and Tikkun and Shvirat Hakeilim, the world of chaos and the world of rectification and the breaking of the vessels. Tonight, I want to dedicate the class to really one idea. There's one idea that's going to run through everything that we say. And that's something that we learned already, but I felt it was very, very important and significant to go much, much deeper into it as we are in the midst of the 9 days on the way to Tisha B'Av. And that is the idea that the word in Hebrew for breaking is, the root is shin bet resh, shever, Shvirat Hakeilim. And we learned it means to break, to destroy. But we also learned that the same root has, in a sense, an opposite meaning. And that is to provide or to sustain. And for those who remember, we saw that in the Torah itself, when in the midst of famine, so Yaakov says to his sons, I see their shever b'Mitzrayim. I see that here it means grain, but in a broader sense, it means I see there's sustenance for us. It's a famine. Go down to Egypt and get us some grain so we could survive. And shever literally means he saw grain. But we learned that in what's called an unclear prophecy, he saw there was breaking that was going to happen in Egypt. And later we see that Yosef is called the mashbir, the provider, because of his wisdom and his advice to Pharaoh. During the 7 years of plenty, they saved grain. And then when the famine came, Yosef became the great provider, the mashbir. So we learned this previously, but the core idea here is so important, not just on a philosophical level or an intellectual level. It's crucial for our own psychological survival, because we are all challenged constantly with different challenges, obstacles, trials, tribulations, traumas, sad news, disturbing news, etc., etc. It's almost daily. Something is happening where we have to deal with the what we might term the negative aspects of this world. Now, if every time something challenging or negative or an obstacle appeared and we fall apart because we don't know how to deal with it, we don't have the vessels to deal with it, it would be a pretty traumatic life. That this whole idea of breaking of the vessels is that the vessels could not hold the energy, could not hold the light. And as we discussed, this happens to us on a daily level where we feel overwhelmed. We feel not capable of dealing with situations. So what I want to do, and I've seen this happen by many teachers, that's really a fascinating way of teaching, that sometimes a teacher will teach for hours on one idea, but will bring quite literally scores of examples of the same idea in order to give the bigger picture of how we could relate to it. So that's what I'm going to attempt to do tonight. I'm going to bring all kinds of ideas, concepts, attitudes that run through Judaism, different terms and different ways we relate to certain things and how we call them. And they're all connected to the same energy that the same energy that can lead to breaking is the same energy can lead to healing, can lead to opportunity. From challenges comes opportunity. So that is what we're going to do. We're going to go through many different examples. There's no particular order here. This could be ordered in many, many different ways. But, excuse me, everyone just keep in mind, we're really trying to take this idea because I feel it's critical for our mental health, our spiritual health, is to be able to deal with adversity and see the silver lining and see how we can turn it around and make something good about it, even though it's not pleasant to deal with adversity. No one's pretending that it is. But there's a big difference between allowing adversity to overwhelm us and to color the way we experience the whole world, and a way to deal with it that we can, one of the expressions is to take lemons and make lemonade. That's one of the modern expressions of this same concept. So we're just going to start with the first idea we started with, how I originally got the idea that this should be the subject during these 3 weeks, starting with the fast day of Yud Zayin B'Tammuz and culminating in the fast day of Tisha B'Av, was the cardinal or the archetypal event that happened on Yud Zayin B'Tammuz was when Moshe broke the tablets. This was a playing out this energy of the breaking of the vessels. It's obvious that the revelation at Sinai was so awesome, so overwhelming, that the people didn't really have the vessels to properly integrate it. So when Moshe, at least according to their calculation, is a little bit late, they like fall apart. It's like they panic, they go into fear mode, they don't know what to do with themselves. So obviously they didn't have the vessels to deal with this tiny little blimp in the bigger picture. And we already saw it because after the first 2 commandments, when God spoke to the people come to Moshe and say, you talk to God, we can't handle it. And of course, the Midrash says that, they had good reason. It says that every word that God said, their souls left their bodies. It just didn't have the vessels. And angels came and restored their soul. And then the next word, and their souls could not stay in the body again. So now we could say, like, okay, so where is the good that came out of breaking of the tablets? So I might have shared this already. This is a Torah from the Netivot Shalom, explaining, there are many explanations why Moshe decided to break the Luchot. If you remember, God didn't command him to do it. This was his own initiative. And later God applauded him that he had done the right thing. Is when Moshe is on the mountain, God told him, go down, your people are worshiping a golden calf. So in the text itself, it doesn't say that Moshe was angry or got upset, or it just says he went down. But it says in the text that when he saw the people dancing around the golden calf, it said, then he became angry and he broke the tablets. So the Slonim Rabbi says that he brings it like a general rule that usually when a person does something wrong, most of the time they know that they're doing something wrong. And they're not celebrating it. It's just, I don't have koach not to do this. Or I can't stop myself. My passions or desires, I just can't control them right now. But it's not like they're like celebrating that they're doing something that they know in their heart is wrong. So when Moshe saw them dancing around the golden calf, it was like, not only are they worshiping an idol, but they're dancing, they're celebrating about it. So Moshe realized he had to do something so shocking that would be the only way to shock people back to their senses. So he broke the tablets. And the truth is, it worked. It worked. As we go through the text, we see that the people did feel bad and they did regret it. Moshe prayed for 2 sets of 40 days for the people to do tshuva, but they did do tshuva. So here's just an example of the breaking of the vessels. It seems like, well, how do you fix this? Well, it was fixed through tshuva. And in fact, the sages, they were startled and they said, how could it be that a generation that saw so many miracles from God could fall so quickly into worshiping idols? In a sense, it doesn't calculate. And the sages said, in order to show tshuva for the multitude, that there was some hidden destiny that had to be played out in order to teach the people how to do tshuva as a people. So what's very interesting is that we know that in the ark that was kept in the Holy of Holies, in the ark was kept the second tablets of the law when Moshe came down again on the first Yom Kippur. And those 2 tablets are, as far as we know, they are hidden somewhere under the Temple Mount. And we believe that they will be found someday. The original, well, actually the second tablets, the original tablets were broken. But the amazing thing is, the sages teach us, it's not just the whole tablets that are in the ark, also the broken ones are. And one would say, like, why would we have the broken tablets in the holiest of holy places? It represents, in a sense, one of the lowest points of Jewish history. And this is the teaching that we're trying to get across tonight, is that we don't ask for breaking, we don't ask for trauma, we don't ask for really serious challenges, but we really believe that we have the power to turn things around. What did Rabbi Nachman, who was very famous for saying, if you believe that you can blemish something, believe that you can fix it. Very important statement. Im tamin she'efshar lekalkel, tamin she'efshar letaken. If you think you could break something, believe that you can fix it. And so here we go back to the root of shever, meaning both breaking, but also sustaining, also providing us an opportunity to fix and in a strange way come out greater or more whole. So there's this concept called the kilkul is the tikkun. Here I just said from Rabbi Nachman, if you believe you can spoil or break, believe you can fix. Well, there's another that in a sense goes one step beyond that, is that in the breaking itself is the fixing. And I heard Rav Ginsburg once, it was a little bit surprising, but when he explained it, it really made sense. He said the destruction of the temples the kilkul was the tikkun. Now here we're in semi-mourning for the temples right now during the 3 weeks. On Tisha B'Av, it reaches its climax where we're mourning for the temples. So it sounds a little surprising that the destruction of the temples is the fixing. So how can that be? So Rav Ginsburg explained that if we look in the prophets for the first temple and the second temple have been warning for a long time that the service of the temple had become empty of meaning. It had declined, it had descended from its heights of intent to something very, very different, to the point that a number of the prophets said that God hates our sacrifices because they're not sincere. They've lost, it's just a shell. The greater meaning of the entire service had become spoiled, had become mikul kal. And so actually, for there to be a new stage, a higher stage, and a more evolutionary stage, in a sense, the temple had to be destroyed because it was almost counterproductive. Now this, we have to be careful with this idea because we are mourning the destruction of the temple, but it's not just the physical temple we're mourning. In a sense, we're mourning that the people had descended to such a point that the temple needed to be destroyed. And the prophets told the people over and over, just change your ways. And it wasn't just a service in the temple. And you could look through virtually all of the prophets, is that the morals and the ethics of society had degenerated. And so the destruction of the temple was the final result of in a sense, much more serious problems. So this is very, very connected to one scenario of how a person becomes a Baal Tshuva. Now, what I'm saying certainly doesn't apply to many, many, many people's experience of why they did tshuva or how they did tshuva. But there's no doubt that there's a pretty large percentage of people who did tshuva is when their previous lifestyle had become abhorrent to the person. That they got to a point where it's like, what am I doing? Where am I going? Like something is really off. Now, again, I'm not saying that everyone who comes back to Torah came because of that reason. But I think we know enough people and enough, Baal Tshuva stories of people who we'll call it a previous, kind of like a previous lifetime, a previous stage of life had reached the end of the line. And they knew it. And it was a crisis. It was a real crisis for many, many people. It's just like, my life is just not working. And I'm caught up in bad practices and lots of immorality and etc. And so that is where the crisis leads to the fixing. Because without that crisis, the fixing wouldn't have come. A person would just kind of go along for the rest of their life, just kind of a little stuck. But sometimes when we get very stuck, the kilkul becomes the tikkun. It becomes the means of the tikkun. So there's two examples that are connected to this. When we left Egypt, so it says that after a few days, Pharaoh kind of figured out that people aren't coming back, and he chases them with a huge army. And in the Torah, it says when Pharaoh got close, meaning he was approaching. And so the sages, the grammatical syntax is not just that he was approaching, but that he was causing other people to come close. And so the sages said that Pharaoh did more for tshuva than anything. In other words, his coming close caused the people to cry out to Hashem, to really pray. And that brought down a miracle, the splitting of the sea. And we have a second case like this, that the sages say it even stronger. When Haman convinces Achashverosh to allow him to commit genocide on the Jewish people. So it says that Achashverosh took off his ring and gave him the ring. That's the ring of authority. And so the sages said that this act did more for the tshuva movement than anything in the world, because we got to that place because, according to tradition, the people ate at the Suda, at the feast of Achashverosh. And at that feast, he took out the vessels of the temple, and he dressed like the high priest, and he drank from the vessels of the temple. And there were many Jews there, and it was like, whoa. And so the sages said that brought down the judgment. But when Achashverosh took off his ring and gave it to Haman, that really, the next thing we know, Mordechai is dressed in sackcloth and ash, and he goes to Esther, and Esther goes in, and then the whole story turns around. So here's just another example where, again, we don't look for these kinds of crises, but someone who is wise knows, don't give up. Like, there's some way to turn this around. Don't know yet. That's what Mordechai said to Esther. If you won't go in to the king, salvation will come from somewhere else. But maybe you and your family will not be saved. And maybe for this reason, you came to be the queen. So that's what Mordechai said. Mordechai said, it will come from someplace else. Mordechai is fasting, wearing sackcloth, but he still has this surety that somehow God will save us. So we mentioned about going down to Egypt. So the Slonim Rebbe asked a very good question. We've all heard this many, 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 many times. We've discussed it here and in the Sunday class about the idea that there are 4 cardinal exiles in Jewish history: Babylonia, Persia, Greece, and Rome. But there's a classic question here. What happened to Egypt? Why don't we say there are 5 classic exiles? Why is Egypt left out of the equation? So the Slonim Rebbe says something very, very profound. He's not the only one to say this. Many people say this in different ways. But he says that the 4 exiles, those were in some way or another connected to our own misdeeds. In other words, had we acted properly, in essence, there did not have to be 4 exiles. And it doesn't excuse what the Babylonians did to us, or what the Persians did, or what the Greeks or the Romans in any way, shape, or form. But in a spiritual level, we set ourselves up for these exiles. The Solar Rabbi said Egypt was very, very different. It wasn't for anything that we did wrong. It was considered an experience that the Jewish people had to go through in order to become the chosen people. That the Jewish people had to experience slavery, oppression, being the underdog, being in that situation, in order to be a true light unto the nations, so that we could empathize with those that were in a similar situation, So that's a very deep idea, because here we're taking the exile and the slavery of Egypt. It was a real slavery, and it was very traumatic. And yet there was an underlying spiritual reason that ultimately would reveal itself in the rest of Jewish history. Now, really, only God knows why it had to be this way and not some other way that we could have learned empathy. But there's actually a saying in the Talmud: one does not truly understand the Torah until they've stumbled over it. That there's this idea that, let's say, a certain halacha of Shabbos. Okay, maybe we learn it somewhere in the back of our mind. We understand it. We do it. And then one time, by mistake, we forget and we end up breaking the halacha. So you could say, well, whoa, terrible, terrible, terrible. But here we say, the upside is this person probably won't happen again, because now they really understand the idea of the halacha, the reason for the halacha. So that's what it says in this. And again, every one of these examples is like a different shade of trying to understand the balance and, in a sense, the integration between breaking and healing, breaking and fixing. Olam Tohu and Olam Tikkun. Now, here's another one that applies directly to Tisha B'Av. And that's a saying by the sages: he or she who mourns over the destruction of the temple will merit to see it in its full joy. So here we see that the mourning is the ingredient needed that we should see the temple in its joy. In other words, we need to go through the mourning in order to be able to experience its fixing. So again, it's just another way of, and I don't want to use the word justify. In other words, nothing justifies, in a sense, pain and destruction. We're not trying to justify. What we're trying to do is learn how to take these kind of challenging, negative experiences and see what good that can come out of it. Like Rabbi Nachman of Gamzu said, Gamzu l'Torah. Also, this is for the good. Well, what does that really mean, actually? He's not saying everything initially is good. See, there's a different saying from Rabbi Akiva, who says, Kol da'avid rachmana l'tav I can't remember the last word, asa. No, avid, excuse me. Kol avid rachmana l'tav avid. Everything that the merciful one does, he does for the good. But that doesn't mean that we experience it initially as good. That's what Nachum Ish Gamzu said. Gamzu, meaning also this, which right now doesn't feel so good, doesn't feel so happy. Also that will be seen to be good. Maybe tomorrow, maybe next year, maybe in our next lifetime. But ultimately, like Rabbi Akiva said, everything that God does ultimately is for the good. There's another verse that's very, very important in this concept that we're trying to develop here, and it's in Hallel. And so we say this on very, very joyous occasions, but it says, Evan ma'asu habanim haita larosh pina. Evan ma'asu habanim, the foundation stone that the builders rejected, it will become the true foundation stone. Evan ma'asu habanim haita larosh pina. It's like the most important of all of them. And so Reb Shlomo once gave over that, and this is based, if you see in the book of Shmuel, when Shaul remains king, but Shaul remains king. Shmuel had already told him, though, that God is taking the kingdom away from you. And in secret, he anoints David. And what follows is Shaul becomes, and I don't use this word lightly, but insanely jealous. And he tries to kill David many, many times. And so it says that David is continually on the run, and he gathered around him like all of the broken people, all of the rejects, all of the, I don't know, in every generation, I guess we have different names, but like, right, all the hippies that were hanging around, all the beatniks, all the radicals, all of the revolutionaries. He gathered up, but the language was kind of like all these broken people, he gathered them together. So Reb Shlomo said, connected to this idea, Evan Ma'asu Abanim Haita Larosh Pina, that all the people that society rejects, these are the best. And actually the Lubavitcher Rebbe said this. I read a number of quotes from him in the early 60s, where he said that, people are complaining about the young people who are seemingly rejecting society, rejecting normative ways of acting, and like this is like a lost generation. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe said, no, I don't see it that way. They see there's something like wrong here, and they have great idealism, and they want to do something about it. So again, for anyone who came on late, we're just giving example after example of trying to understand that in the breaking is also the seeds of fixing. There's another idea that Reb Shlomo gave over a lot in the Slonim Rebbe also. This idea is someone could do everything right, but if they don't fix the main thing they came into this world to fix, then something's missing. So the Slonim Rebbe asked rhetorically, well, how do you know what's your main thing to fix? How do you know what it is that you came in the world to fix? So he gave a very simple formula. It's not simple to realize it or deal with it, but he said, everyone, if they look at their life, look at those things that are the hardest for you. That's your tikkun. Because sometimes we're looking for our tikkun. We're looking for what we need to do to fix ourselves in this world. What's the purpose of our being here? And so sometimes it's easier than others. I mean, some people have it easier than others trying to find that. But he gave a very good formula because everyone has things that are hard for them. But they're hard because we need to fix them. We need to fix them. So here again, we take something that's hard, and yet if we work on it, that becomes our fixing. That is our fixing. Now, this is a verse that we've learned before in a different context, and that is Eit Sarah LiYaakov Umimena V'Yoshia. It's a time of trouble for Yaakov, and from it he will be saved. So the simple meaning is somewhat clear, but Chassidus explains it like a little bit deeper. It's not just that a person has troubles, and then hopefully a fixing, a salvation will come about and fix the trouble. Here it says it's a time of trouble for Yaakov, and from it, meaning from the trouble itself, is the seed of how we fix it, of how we get saved from it. So that's like a Hasidic touch on this. Now then there's two other things that are very obvious here that we've mentioned, is the idea that there's nothing as whole as a broken heart, which is, of course, is like a paradoxical type of statement. But again, this is trying to point out that breaking is not, if left broken, will remain broken. But when we fix that which is broken, then there's nothing more whole than that. And now this gets to the next idea of, and also we've learned this before, and this is the statement in the Zohar, the really important statement in the Zohar, that one side of my heart is crying, and one side of my heart is joyous. And from this, if you remember in Ecclesiastes, in Kohelet, in the 3rd chapter, there are the 28 times. There's a time for this and a time for that, a time for this, a time for that. So there's a time to cry and there's a time to laugh. But that is like chronological, meaning there are times that are meant for crying, and there are times that are meant for laughing. But Reb Shlomo taught this, others teach it. What it really means on a deep level is that a deep person is one whose heart is always crying and always laughing simultaneously. Now, of course, that is not an easy state of consciousness to reach. For many people, just knowing when to be happy and when to be crying is a challenge. That's a challenge enough for many, many people. But to know how to do it at the same time. But this is the secret of this word that we're talking about, shever. The secret is it's not one or the other. It's not breaking and then hopefully in the future somehow there will be a fixing. Again, that in itself would be wonderful. That in itself is a good attitude. But here we're trying to go much, much deeper into the human psyche. And the way Reb Shlomo explained it was, if I look at the world and I see what a broken place it is, and how many wars there are, and how much sickness, and how much hatred, and how much misunderstanding and violence, how can a person not be broken? On the other hand, when I look at the world and I see so many reasons to be joyous, so much to be appreciative for, so many beautiful things, how can I not be joyous? So that is the secret of the broken tablets and the whole tablets being in the ark at the same time. It's not like one or the other. Again, that doesn't mean that that's an easy place to get to. But it says in the Talmud, Ein mosrin sitrei Torah el misha doeg belibo. They meaning like heaven, God, the angels, the yeshiva shel mala, do not give over secrets of the Torah except to someone who's worried in their heart. What does that mean? It doesn't mean worried to pay their bills, worried about their job. It means a bigger kind of worry about the unrectified state of the world that we live in. That bothers me. That makes me worry about the worry. That's who they give over the secrets of the Torah to. Because here they see that a person has both of these things. He has the capability of being broken by the world, but not so broken that they can't work to fix it. Now, this is a very important idea, because you see many, 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 many people that the world breaks them. This is tragic, but because of illness, bad relationships, bad mazel, lack of money, whatever it is, that people are just overwhelmed by life, and the world breaks them. They're broken people. So when we say that someone has to be worried in their heart, it's not so worried that I can't be positive enough to do something to try to fix my small world, a bigger sphere of influence. You see a lot of idealistic people that this happens to. A lot of very idealistic people, like really, really, really want to change the world for really good reasons. But sometimes when it's just not happening, sometimes people become so disillusioned that they become like cynical. And that's a very, very sad thing, because they started out very idealistic and they really tried to change things. And many people put 10, 20, 30 years into a movement or a project or a goal or a profession, and then it doesn't turn out the way they hoped. And it can break people. So that kind of breaking is very tragic. But when we're, in a sense, advocating a certain attitude of feeling the brokenness of the world, but it's never to get to the point where one becomes cynical, one gives up their idealism. Some of you might know who I'm talking about. We had a very, very precious Rabbi on the Moshav for many, many years. And his name was Michael Golem. And he used to, when he would give Misha Berachs, he would give these like incredible on one foot kind of brachas. But he would always bless people. Never, never, ever, ever, ever give up your dreams. That was one of his favorite, and he would say it like so sincerely. Never, ever, ever, ever give up your dreams. So that's a good place to bring this together, because Am Yisrael had a dream for 2,000 years to return to our homeland, to rebuild Yerushalayim, to rebuild the temple, to gather Jews in the four corners of the earth, and to bring Mashiach and peace and harmony in the world. And we've never given up. We have never given up. And here we're about to have Tisha B'Av. And a real mourning is really, really feeling what we're lacking here. There really needs to be a few moments on Tisha B'Av for real that we really feel the depths of brokenness, sadness, not knowing anything. But that has to be just for a few moments. We can't stay in that place. But it's really important to get there for a few minutes. Very, very important to get to that place of really feeling, what does it mean that we don't have a Beit HaMikdash? What does it mean that Mashiach is still not here? What does it mean that we still have a world like the world that we have? That should deeply bother us, deeply affect us, and deeply want us to do something to change it. So I bless us all. I bless us all in a crazy way to feel that low on Tisha B'Av. But don't stay there. We're not meant to stay there. We're not meant to stay there. And like it says, anyone who mourns for the destruction of the temple will live to see the joy of the temple. Bezrat Hashem.